Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Passive Income Show. I'll be your host. This is Carl D. And tonight we have a very exciting topic, which is about a legal way how to handle tenants. Marami ba kayo dito na may mga problema kayo with your tenants, how to handle them legally? Para hindi naman kayo ma-stress, no? So hello everybody sa lahat ng nandito watching live. Can you just go to the comment box and type hello Carl D, or what do you want to learn today, or tiga saan kayo, watching from where? Ayan, I'm seeing people come in now. Hello, hello. Yes, feel free to go to the comment box and just say hello everybody. So without further ado, as you come in, please just type in the comment box and say hi para naman ma-acknowledge namin kayo. And we have an exciting night ahead. Without further ado, I will introduce our next guest. Our guest is a very good friend of mine. She is the founder of RUS Law Firm. She is a CPA lawyer and leads the firm's corporate and tax practice. Yung guest natin ngayon ay merong in-depth experience sa estate planning, tax structuring, sa compliance. She is from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and she's a top graduate where she received many awards, including the Dean's Medal for Academic Excellence. Our guest attorney is a registered financial planner and also a chartered trust estate planner. After completing the certificate course provided by American Academy of Financial Management, where she also graduated with distinction. She has extensive experience in corporate law. Some of her significant works involve corporate restructuring, tax litigation, settlement, estate planning, and settlements. She performs corporate housekeeping and provides legal advice to various top corporations in the country. She is a real estate lawyer, one of the top expert in real estate law, and she does due diligence, negotiations, and provides advice to post-sale transactions like property management, leasing, and investment. Without further ado, we have an exciting topic tonight about 8 things that you need to know if you're a landlord. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring in Atty Rachel Uy-San Juan.
Hi! Hello everyone!
Yes! Guys, sa lahat ng watching live, say hi to Attorney. Hi, Attorney. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. I hope everybody's keeping safe during this pandemic. I hope everyone is healthy.
Kamusta naman in the legal world right now, Attorney?
So far, it seems that though there are some projects that are on hold, it's for us in the corporate world, business is we're starting to do some projects already. Thankfully, the legal practice, at least for the corporate side, is not too affected by the pandemic. And actually, for the investors, there are still a lot of investors pouring their investments in the Philippines.
So guys, reaching out to all the audience, if you're a businessman, you have a property purchase, and you want the services of a real estate attorney and a CPA, tax expert, you can reach out to Attorney San Juan. Yes, no, Attorney? Okay lang?
Yes, of course.
You are open for new customers.
Yes, we are.
Fantastic. Kasi wag niyo isipin na snabero kami ni attorney. We know we are very much open. You can reach out to us anytime. All right, attorney. So what do you have prepared for our audience tonight?
Okay, so we've prepared 8 points that every landlord should consider in leasing their property. Number 1, of course, is actually having a comprehensive lease contract, no? Because a lot of your problems may be avoiding by executing a comprehensive lease contract. So the lease contract should at least have these provisions. Number 1, terms of the lease, which are, of course, the monthly rent, the lease period. Number 2, use of the property, whether it's residential or commercial. Why? Because of course, if the property is meant for residential only, you have to be clear to your tenant that it's really for residential purposes only, no? If it's for commercial, definitely you have to advise your tenant that they need to secure the necessary permits for that use. Third is whether the tenant can assign or sublease the property. Because under the law, if you're silent in this provision, the tenant can actually sublease the property if there's no provision of prohibiting you from subleasing the property. So by law, if that's silent, if there is the provision sublease is silent, then the tenant could sublease it. And remember in lease, before you enter into a lease contract, you make a due diligence of the lessee. You check the background of the lessee, whether the lessee could actually afford the lease, what's his or her business, assuming it's a commercial property, um, the activities that they will conduct in your property. So these are the things that you do before you enter into a contract of lease. But if you allow the tenant, that your tenant to sublease the property, or if you fail to indicate in your contract that they cannot sublease the property, it's very possible that the person that will use the property will not be the same person that you conducted a due diligence on. So all of your work prior to entering the contract is futile. So
Mm-hmm.
it's useless, no? Fourth will be clause on pre-termination. When can you pre-terminate the contract? So if there's non-payment of monthly rent, for example, they failed to use the property in accordance to the agreement. For example, it's a residential property, then suddenly they use it for commercial property. Sometimes they also, you can also include the provision on for example, yung misrepresentation. So for example, if you're renting out a residential property, there's a representation that there would be only 5 members of the family that will live there. Then suddenly you discover that there are 5 individuals living in your property. You know, one practical way to check that is sometimes you visit for example, it's a condo or a house. You count the pairs of slippers outside the door. So if it's more than 5, mas marami yon. Kasi that's one way for us to check eh. That's one tip I got from my client. That's one way we discovered that a lot of persons are living in the unit. Because there are a lot of slippers outside the door. So the
Mm-hmm.
agreement is just 5, but there are 7 or 8 slippers outside the door. So it means there are more than 5 in the unit. So lastly would be a lockout provision. So for example, what is a lockout provision?
Mm-hmm.
A lockout provision is this is a way for that the lessee will give an authority to the lessor or to the lessor's authorized representative to enter or break open the lease property and take immediate possession of the lease premises in case of termination of the lease. Why? Because under the law, even though the lease term has already been terminated or the lease term has already expired, or for example, even though your tenant's not paying rent, you cannot just lock out the property or just barge in and force the person to vacate the property. You cannot do that. If you do that, you could be held liable, no? But if you have this provision, at least you have that shield because you're authorizing that person to actually open the property, no? Because the lease term has already prescribed, no? Then another provision, the lockout provision, is that other than entering into the property, you're authorizing the lessor to take all the furnitures and fixtures in the property, sell it, or store it as a way of payment for the unpaid rent. So this is a very important provision in case of tenants who refuse to leave the property. No? And if you want to evade, for example, you want to avoid going to the court because it's very expensive, or you just don't want the hassle of going to the court. So the lockout provision is very important.
Attorney, I'm gonna let you finish your number one. Dumadami na yung questions eh.
Yes, yes, okay.
You're done?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, good.
That's number one.
Okay, we'll start with a simple one. What's the concern of a sublease? Let's say naman na nagbabayad naman yung nagka-sublease. What are the possible concern?
Okay. Yung concern ng sublease is that, for example, kahit nagbabayad siya, the sublease kasi you cannot control the activity. So for me, the number one risk is that you don't have a legal relationship with the sublease, with the sublessee. So it's difficult to control, it's difficult to impose the rules. Second, you do not know the contract between your lessee and the sublessee.
Okay.
So there might be some terms there that you're not agreeable and they're using your property, right?
I got it. Yeah.
Lastly, yun nga sinabi ko, before you enter into contract, nag-due deal ka with your lessee eh. Due deal mo yan. Pero itong sublessee, biglang they're using your property, then you do not know kung ano naman, kung sino ba sila, what are their business, what's their background. So, that's the risk there.
Attorney, how about ito, medyo umiinit na yung mga questions. From a landlord, my tenant 2 months nang hindi nagbabayad. Pero siya pa ang mayabang. How do you deal with that?
Okay. First is actually that's my second point. The second point is yung advance rent. So, yung sa advance rent kasi, people take, parang ang notion lang ng tao with the advance rent, it's okay, it's an advance rental. Literally, it's an advance rent. However, what's the purpose of the advance rent or motivation behind the advance rent? It actually will cover it's also the duration and coverage of it will depend on your capacity or willingness to enforce collection. So, ano ibig sabihin nun? So, for example, your advance rate is 2 months. So, for example, February, hindi na siya nagbayad. So, you have until February, March. End of March lang yung rent niya, di ba? So, dapat, huwag mo nang paabutin ng by March kasi yun lang yung palugid mo eh. So, dapat, after first week or second week, you send notices already. So, kasi that's your grace period to yung enforce the terms of the lease without going the extra hassle of probably going to the court or eviction, which is something that we want to avoid kasi it's very costly. So,
Attorney,
yeah.
Kadagdag ito, sobrang bait na landlord, si MSCU. Sobrang bait niya, umabot ng 5 months na hindi nagbabayad. I mean, syempre first few months, di ba, parang kinakausap ka niya, sir, pasensya ka na sir, nawalan ako ng work eh. Then you keep, okay, before you know it, 5 months na pala. How do you handle it?
Oo. So, yung sa 5 months, I think talagang eviction na siya, no? So, it's really, kasi kung hindi naman, even though they're reaching out, so, ibig sabihin, nakikipag-communicate naman, but still, they refuse to pay the balance or at least make a partial payment, then if there is a lockout provision in your contract, then enforce it. If you don't have a lockout provision in your contract, then we have to file an unlawful detainer case, no? So ano yung unlawful detainer? In layman's term, it's actually an ejectment case. So in unlawful detainer, ang ibig sabihin kasi nun is that when the property is initially lawfully possessed, in case of a lease, lawful naman yung initial possession. They're possessing the property legally. But at some point, naging illegal siya. Why? Nag-expire na yung lease term eh. So, then you file an unlawful detainer case. So, the unlawful detainer case, you file it with the MTC. So, supposedly, the case should be, mabilis lang yan, it's summary procedure eh. So, however, before filing the unlawful detainer case, you have to serve written notice to the person. Or if wala yung person doon, lagi nag-i-evade, hindi mo ma-serve, just post the notice outside the property. Post it.
Oh,
So, as a
attorney,
practical,
okay.
yeah.
I like what you're saying. So this is very helpful. I think
Yes.
maraming tao ito yung concern. So kunwari kunwari first month hindi nagbayad. Ano yung ba yung parang step by step? First month.
First month, ano lang, reminder lang, letter. Just, kasi nga, depende dun sa palugid mo eh. So, for example, your advance is 2 months. So, in your head, you just have 2 months to collect the arrears, no? If 1 month lang yung advance rate mo, 1 month lang dapat yon. So, you have to be firm. So, kahit first week, 1 week pa lang na naglalapse, make a reminder na. Send a reminder. Kung informal, pwedeng text, pwedeng email. But if hindi pa rin nagre-reply, you send a formal, ibig sabihin written, na duly received by them, demanding for payment.
Ano ba guys ang mas nakakainis? Yung hindi ka, yung tinataguan ka? O yung kinakausap ko pero sige, siguro next week ng next week, no? Attorney, ano mo mas okay?
Actually, parehas nakakainis eh. Oo, parehas nakakainis eh. Kasi parang, both the other one nagpa-promise pero hindi naman tinutuwad. Yung isa, as in hindi nagpapakita, no?
Correct.
Oo. So, but in both cases, we have a remedy under the law, which is filing an unlawful detainer. Hopefully, you have a lockout provision in your contract. Easier yon. So,
kunwari walang lockout provision, we all start being very trusting, mababait tayo. Kunwari walang lockout provision, after ko mag-serve ng letter, nilagyan ko na ng poster sa pinto, ano nalagay mo dito? Hindi nagbabayad ng renta to.
Well, the notice is a notice to pay the rent, or a notice to, it's really a final demand to pay, no?
Okay.
Oo. So, if hindi pa rin mag-comply, in case of land, it's 15 days. In case of building, so for example, condo, 5 days, then you can already file an unlawful detainer case. But note that an unlawful detainer case, you have to file within 1 year from the deprivation of the possession. Meaning kung kailan siya naging illegal yung pag-stay niya in the property, you have to file it in 1 year. If you don't file within 1 year, meron ka pa naman recourse, but it's not an unlawful detainer case. You file it with an RTC. We call it action publicana. So it's very technical, but the downside of it, it's hindi na siya a summary procedure. So mas mahaba yung process niya as opposed to unlawful detainer case na supposedly mas mabilis yung process kasi wala masyadong hearing yon. It's really just filing of affidavits and position papers. That's it. So dapat mag-rule na yung court. So pre-COVID, probably you can finish the proceedings, probably will be done by 3 months. That's it. 3 months, 4 months. So tapos na yan. But syempre ngayon, COVID, close ngayon yung court. So may konting delay. But technically, it should be very, very fast. Mabilis lang yung procedure. And it's not that costly. Merong cost, pero hindi ganun kamahal. Kasing mahal as opposed to filing it the RTC kasi mas mahaba yung procedure.
Attorney, I mean, let's be realistic, diba? Parang sabihin natin, tenant natin. Swerte na tayo if they acknowledge and they exit, diba?
Yeah.
And they say thank you to you. Na parang, thank you, na-appreciate ko, you let me stay 2 months. Pasensya na kayo, talagang ano. But not everybody's like that, diba mga audience? Yung iba, sila pa yung matapang. What, I mean, you mentioned RTC, ganon, but they are all paperworks eh. The not paying tenant is still inside. Where will that, I mean, what will that court in effect, parang may police ba na darating?
Oh, okay. So once you file a case, actually you can file a petition in court to have yung injunction, meaning ibibigay ulit sa yung property, no? So The court, with the power of the court, syempre utusan yan. Utusan niya yung sheriff, it will be assisted, you will be assisted in returning to you your property. So that's the beauty of going to the court kung talagang sobrang matigas yung tenant. Kasi unfortunately for a tenant na ganyan katigas, unfortunately you have no recourse, especially if yung contract mo very loosely drafted or nakalimutan mo mag-draft kasi nga trust yung una no? So you have to go to court. So hopefully lang before you enter into a contract, kahit verbal lang yan, you make a due diligence of the person, of the lessee, para maiwasan yung mga ganyang instances.
Attorney, stretch ko pa konti yung situation. So, barangay ba? Ang barangay ba is helpful? Do you go to barangay for help?
Yes. So, yung barangay, they're very helpful naman. So, there are some instances na it's within their jurisdiction. So, kahit naman wala, they assist. Actually, ang maganda sa barangay is that there's a sense of authority din doon sa barangay. And syempre, yung sa lessee, mahiya din naman sila na pumupunta doon yung barangay and they're being subpoenaed by the barangay to attend a hearing, etc. Especially if you are in a community, especially for example, in a business community na maliit lang, world gets around So sometimes it's a factor also to the person. Like for example, in one of my clients' cases, it's one of our experience. The tenant, same do sa sitwasyon mo na parang nakipag-communicate naman pero sinasabi niya next month, hanggang ilang buwan ng next month, 'di ba? So then tumawad pa from kuwari 100,000 naging 80,000 na lang, bago naging 60, bago next month pa rin. So at some point, 'di ba? So alam mo nang hopeless na yung case. So my client doesn't want to go to court. Kasi nga yung hassle of going to the court, then yung cost, syempre you need to hire a lawyer. Sabi ko, another way is to refer to the barangay. Kasi baka naman when you refer to the barangay, mahiya din naman yung lessee. So when we refer to the barangay, thankfully the barangay chairman is actually very helpful naman. So nag-mediate siya. Then through the barangay, we were able to at least get the property back. Yung as to the arrears, of course, there's an agreement to pay it in installment. But the primary, actually, if you're the landlord, the primary objective, number one, is to get back your property. Yung arrears, secondary na lang yun. I mean, syempre, gusto mo pa rin makolekta yun, but the main goal is for you to get possession of your property, to get back the possession. So we were able to get that through the barangay lang.
Barangay,
so, yeah. So, pwedeng barangay muna. Oo.
Okay, attorney, we have some questions coming, pero I'll let you go number 2, number 3, number 4. Go.
Okay. Number 2 is yung advance rent. So, na-discuss ko na yan. Second is for you to ensure that you have a security deposit. Why? A security deposit is a guarantee that the lessee will take care of the property, will honor the provisions of the contract. So at the end of the lease term, the security guarantee will also compensate you to clean the unit, the property, in case it wasn't turned over in a clean manner. Second is to replace or restore furniture that was damaged. So for units that are fully furnished, siya, pinarent mo, of course, may security deposit. And typical provision in a security deposit is that it will answer for all the damage dun sa unit. Minsan, nagkakaroon sila ng issue is to the amount that will be charged dun sa security deposit. So my suggestion is that, especially for major appliances, like for example, washing machine, refrigerator, you already put the value in your contract. So for example, Washing machine, how much? For example, 10,000. Or refrigerator, how much? Lagay nyo na yung value nung appliances. Then, depending on the length of the lease term, you can say that at the end of the lease term, for example, masira siya, the amount that will be charged against the security deposit will be the Annex A less amount kasi because of depreciation, no?
Yep.
So sometimes hindi nagcha-charge ng depreciation. So pag minsan kung ano na yung amount yung nilagay, yun na yung binabawas. So my suggestion, especially for fully furnished properties, you already list in the contract of lease, nakalagay na naka-annex na, naka-list down na yung lahat ng furniture na nakalagay sa inyo, then the cost. Yung cost,
Attorney,
yes.
we have actual experience. After 4 years of renting, 4 years of good payments, hindi happy si owner dun sa flooring. Marami daw gas-gas. Gusto papalitan lahat. Paano ba yan? Sabi naman ni tenant, wear and tear naman yan. Talagang maluluma yung flooring mo, 4 years na kasi. But pag sinarge mo naman sa tenant, papalitan yung buo, masyadong mahal.
Oo, so if that is a normal wear and tear, under the law, the normal wear and tear cannot be charged against the lessee.
Got it.
That is parang intentional. Sobrang lalim, for example. Pero if the scratch is really due to the normal wear and tear, it cannot be charged to the lessee.
Got it.
Oo.
Attorney, we have a very good question. I'm gonna move a bit faster para umabot tayo sa number 8. Ito magandang question. Anonymous, pero baliktad naman. Siya naman ang tenant. 5 months na silang delay kasi na-affect yung business nila. Open, close, open, close. So, pero tumatakbo pa daw yung rent nila kahit na hindi sila nag-open. Hindi daw sila binibigyan ng discount. Ano ma-advise mo pag tenant side naman?
Oo, on the tenant side, unfortunately, on the side of the law, wala masyadong protection. Kasi especially right now during the pandemic, no? So, I suppose it's a commercial property kasi business.
Office.
So talagang tuloy yan. But there are several instances, parang ang dami naman ngayon na lessor na instead of parang losing their tenant, they would give discount instead. So for example, the property is being leased out for 100,000. Since hindi kaya ng property nung lessee, they would give 30 or 50% discount. Some instances, they are just collecting 30% of the original rent just to keep the tenant. So it's more of siguro negotiations na lang or pakiusap na lang with the landlord. Another way is baka you can try na if sabihin nyo lipat na lang kayo in some other place or area kung di siya magbibigay kasi you will realize the landlord might also realize that instead of losing the tenant, they might as well give some discount na lang or concession.
Okay. Ayaw daw kasi silang paalisin. Hindi nila ma-pull out yung gamit.
Bakit? Okay. Okay. Bakit kaya sila hindi ayaw paalisin?
Kasi hindi sila nagbayad ng 5 months.
Hindi sila nagbayad ng 5 months. Okay.
Pero dumadagdag every time di sila umaalis.
Correct. Oo. Pero that depends on their contract.
Okay.
Kasi dapat hindi sila pinagbabawalan na mag-pull out ng stuff.
Okay. Okay.
As a general, dapat bawal.
Very good. Thank you. Quick question. 3-year contract. Diba may mga ganun 3-year contract with escalation. On 1.5 year nalugi na yung negosyo. Sarado na. Kailangan ba, obliged ba sila to pay for the whole 3 years?
Okay. So, it depends on the contract. So, dun sa number 1 natin, may pre-termination clause. So, normally, ito typical sa mga malls, syempre yung mga medyo nasa upper hand in the bargaining table, no? So, typical na ilalagay nila in case of pretermination, the lessee shall pay for the rent for the entire unused term. So for example, 1.5 years pa lang yung nagamit mo pero nag-terminate ka ng lease, you still have to pay for the next 1.5 years kasi 3 years yung contract. But it's a contractual provision. Hindi siya mandatory under the law. So you have to check your contract kung meron bang ganung provision.
Ingat-ingat, ano? So it's really always good to have a legal advisor in your business. Oo, you know.
Kasi sometimes you just sign yung boiler yung as in the standard contract of lease without really reading all of those fine print. So you have to check. So if you're a landlord, syempre gusto mo yon na magbayad siya for the entire entire period of rent. Pero ang nangyayari dyan, if there's long term yung lease, sometimes pag natapos yung lease term, you negotiate na para instead of a year and a half of rent, pwede bang I just pay a penalty of 5 months, 3 months, 4 months? Yun. Ganun, usually yun yung nangyayari.
One more. Pinarent ko sa tenant ko. Walang sublease clause. Pinasublease niya to an illegal person or entity, illegal. Ngayon, ayaw umalis. How do you deal with that?
Ayun na nga. Yun yung problema. Kasi the fact na nandun yung walang sublease clause, ibig sabihin, inaalaw mo mag-sublease. Nung nag-sublease siya, that's valid. Pero kung illegal yung sublease, meaning kunwari meron namang illegal activity yon, pwede mo siyang paalisin kasi why? Because yung acts nung sublessee is also acts of your lessee. So it violates the main contract. It's just that yun nga, hindi na iwasan. If you have a prohibition against subleasing, dapat hindi na nangyari yung ganong instance.
Who do you go to if you are in that situation? Police ba? Barangay ba? Admin ng building?
First, admin ng building.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way. If they're not helpful, you can go to the barangay. Okay. No? Oo. It's not a police matter. So after that, you go to court kung talagang wala na. Oo.
Okay.
Paminsan, a police can help. Why? Takot. Yun, panakot lang. Pero it's in a legal process, it's not really a police matter. Oo.
Quickly, can we implement the lockout clause even walang barangay na present? Sila maglalabas ng gamit?
Oo, pwede. It's just that pwede siya kasi under the lockout provision, you give authorization to the lessor to perform the break-in, padlocking of the property, pulling out of the stuff, of the furnitures. Pwede. It's just that for prudence at saka para din may witness, you invite the barangay.
I see.
Better. Yeah.
Thank you for that advice. Sige, attorney, what's the next one?
The next one is number 4 is how to handle complaints. So for example, may mga tenants kasi na masyadong mareklamo talaga. Okay. So my advice is in the contract, in your lease contract, you say it's an as is, where is basis. So kung ano yung property na yan na yan. Second, there should be a confirmation for that the tenant inspected the property and they're okay with the property. Kasi sometimes, pagdating ng tenant, pag move in nila, biglang, ayoko nito, papalit nito. So before the move in, there should be a confirmation na you inspected the property and you're okay. Wala nang changes na papalitan.
Paano kung ma-complain yung tenant tapos hindi pa nagbabayad together?
Ayun na nga, sobra pa, 'di ba? Ma-complain na, hindi pa nagbabayad. Oo. So, yan yung mga iiwasan natin, no? So, for that, you have to also indicate who will be responsible for the repairs and maintenance. So, typically, kasi sometimes the contract states pag minor repair, si lessee. Pag major repair, si lessor. It's just that how do you determine minor and major, di ba? So sometimes what we do is we peg a value.
Got it.
So anything below 5,000, below 5,000 is minor.
Got it.
Anything above 5,000 is major, for example. So depending on the property, so pag minsan tataasan namin yung value, 15,000 below is minor. Diba? So,
Attorney, quickly lang from Mr. Edmond Lee, a good friend of mine,
mm-mm.
to business, commercial. They were not allowed to open, then close, open, close. So, bumaba yung revenue. Binaba na nila yung rental, na-negotiate na, but they are still not paying. What is your advice?
Okay. If they're still not paying, probably yung recourse na lang is yung diniscuss ko kanina is probably filing an ejectment case. Kasi last recourse mo na yun eh. I think in your case, nagawa naman na lahat. For example, bumaba na yung rent, you negotiated with them naman, you've given them enough grace period to raise enough amount to pay the arrears, pero wala pa rin. Then if ayaw pa rin nila, inform them first that you're terminating the lease. Then you give them, like, for example, 30 days to vacate. Pag ayaw pa rin nila, file a case already.
When you say file a case, you call a lawyer. Kasi para yung lawyer
Yes.
magtutulong sa'yo. Okay, got it.
Mm-mm.
Attorney, how about, ano ba yung question ko? How about, di ba, kay Marvin muna. We have a question from Mr. Marvin Guillermo. Dalawa lang dapat yung tenant. Pero 6 ang tsinelas, kunwari 6, di ba? Pero nagbabayad naman. How do you deal with?
Okay. So, typically in the contract, it's of course it's a violation ng contract. Since it's a violation of the contract, it could be a ground to terminate the contract. Pero syempre as a landlord, kung kuwari ganyan, I think it's a minor violation. For the first offense, you send a letter muna na advising them na, dalawa lang yung tao na agreement natin, pero when I went there are 6 people, or when I was advised there are 6 people leaving the property. So you give them a friendly note lang, a reminder that per your contract, there should be only 2 persons leaving the property.
Got it.
Kuwari after a week, you make a follow-up. Pag ganun pa rin, you make a reminder. Pero siguro bigyan mo lang siya ng mga in a month to comply. Pag wala pa rin, probably it's time to make a more mas stern warning. Then maybe it could also be a ground for you to terminate the contract if you want.
Attorney, how do you terminate a contract? So you write a letter?
Yes.
Ikaw lang, personal lang?
Yes, personal lang. Personal lang.
Terminating the contract, ganun.
Based on syempre it should be with valid grounds, no? So, you have to refer to your contract, ano ba yung valid grounds na to terminate the contract. So, these are typically non-payment, violation of the terms of the contract. Mm-mm.
So guys, I'm gonna let attorney drink water muna. So habang drink ka ng water, attorney, sa mga audience, I just want to share with you how super important yung quality ng contract natin. Kailangan nandun lahat. If it's not there, it's gonna be hard to implement. So I encourage you, especially if your lease are big or you have multi-door apartments, get the services of an attorney and para to help you draft the contract. Medyo may bayad tayo upfront, pero it will give you lesser stress down the road. Yun. So attorney, next number.
Next is number 5. Is to determine the use of the property. So I've discussed earlier already na, okay, so you have to be clear that your lease property is only for example, residential or commercial. Kung commercial, better also to specify kung ano yung commercial activity. So for example, it's for trade, warehousing, manufacturing. So you can limit the activity in your property. So it's very important and also to assess yung legitimacy of the activity. So para din malaman yung mga permits na kailangan. Especially if you're leasing commercial property, I've handled several instances already na yung lessee meron palang hindi binayaran na business tax or
Okay.
meron palang unpaid taxes sa local government. Umalis na yung tenant.
Oh.
So ngayon, pinapalis namin yung bagong property to another tenant. Hindi mabigyan ng business permit kami because sabi ng City Hall, our previous tenant have unpaid taxes pala or
Oh.
unpaid business fees. So how would you go after the previous tenant? Though, syempre, you can argue with the city treasurer's office or the local government na, oh, bakit ako yung sinisingil mo? You have to go after the previous lessee. Though legally you can do that, pero at the end of the day, ikaw pa rin na-hassle kasi ikaw pa rin inipit eh.
Correct. Kaya,
So, it's very important that you monitor the activity, and if that is a business, every business renewal, you also ask for a copy of their business permit
oh,
to ensure that they're operating legally in your
wow.
property.
That's a
Oo.
very good advice. Kaya Marvin Guillermo, mag cryptocurrency na lang tayo. Wala pang sakit ng ulo.
Oo, ano lang, server.
We have a question here. Very good question. My friend did not issue official receipt to the tenant. Now, alam nung tenant, ginagamit niya ngayon threatening to report to the BIR kasi hindi siya nagbabayad ng rent na. So parang ginamit.
Mm-mm.
How do you get out of that?
Okay. Of course, legally, dapat nag-issue ng official receipt, no? Oo. So, but, depending on yung lessee kasi, they also have an obligation to withhold taxes in some instances. So, for that, dapat nag-withhold din sila. Kung business yan, syempre hindi nila makiklaim yan sa expense, dapat nag-withhold din sila. So, both sides baka may liability. So, in that case, on the part naman ng lessor, if, for example, 1 year pa lang yung hindi mo nababayaran, or 1 year pa lang yung hindi mo na-i-issue na OR, or konting period pa lang, you might opt to just issue para matanggal lang siya sa yung risk of yung risk sa BIR na ma-audit, etc. Then issue an OR, then just pay the corresponding taxes. But in that case, legally, you have to issue official receipts for your rent income.
All right. Thank you, attorney. Next number.
Next number is taxes. So, know the taxes that you need to pay. No? So, if the property that you're renting out is a residential property, and for example, it doesn't exceed the monthly rent does not exceed 15,000 pesos, then it's VAT exempt. You don't have to pay VAT. So, but if your monthly rent is more than 15,000, as a general rule, it's VATable. Pero if for example in a year, hindi naman siya mag-exceed ng 3 million, the gross receipts will not exceed 3 million, then it will not be VATable, but you have to pay 3% percentage tax. Second is you have to pay business taxes. There are a lot of lessors na hindi nag-apply for a lessor's permit. But if you're leasing out commercial properties, definitely you have to apply for a lessor's permit. Then when you have a lesser permit, you have to pay your business taxes. So you need to know your taxes. Why? Para alam nyo kung magkano ba talaga yung income. So that whenever you negotiate for your monthly rent, you know what will be your net amount, no? Kasi baka at the end of the day, biglang you want a net amount of, for example, 50,000, pero you fail to consider the taxes, hindi na 50,000 nakuha mo, 40,000 na lang. So, it's best for you to know your tax dues.
Attorney,
So, yes.
after hearing all your advice about so guys, sa mga audience, si Attorney Rachel is both a CPA and a lawyer. No, attorney?
Yes, yes.
Dalawa. So, package na. Kumbaga, isa na nakausap natin. Attorney, ako curious, ito personal ko, let's say, yung mga rentals namin, what services can we get from your company or how much more or less will it cost? How do you price ba yung ganung services?
Mm-mm.
Make sure we do it the right way.
Okay. So, what we can do, what we usually offer to companies who are into leasing or property management companies are, first would be the review of all of their contracts. Because sometimes you just need a template.
Yeah.
And the template sometimes will be customized based on your experience as a lessor. So for example, nagkaroon ka na experience na residential siya, biglang residential pala siya ng isa lang nga lang yung tao pero meron 10 siyang aso. So, alam mo yun? So, yung mga ganong experience, biglang masasabi sa'yo nung lessor. So, you have to put it in the contract, okay, bawal pala pets. Or kung may pets, isa lang. Diba?
Mhm.
So, yung mga ganong instances that we can customize, we can make a template contract for the company and customize it based on your experiences and based on the need of the company. No?
Are you okay to share more or less how much will be the minimum fee or is it
Okay.
private?
The minimum fee for a simple contract, probably we charge around mga 15,000. Then it could be lower if it's a very simple contract and depending on the demand or the need of the client.
How about pag may advisory on the taxes, ganun?
For the advisory, if it's just a one-time consultation, we just charge a one-time consultation of 4,000. However, for some instances, we were engaged on a retainer basis because sometimes the company, especially if you have a lot of properties already and you encounter problems on a regular basis, you
Yeah.
really need a retained counsel for that.
Okay. Sign me up, attorney. Baka dumami na yung biglang callers mo starting tomorrow. So, pila na ako. Attorney, we are now down to our last 15 minutes. So, what's your next advice?
Next is yung provision on the eviction. So which we have discussed, no. I think I missed the number 6, which is yung improvements. So there must be a provision on improvements. Why? Because if you're silent, ano ba yung improvements? Meaning yung mga dinagdag mo doon sa property. So under the law, if the lessee makes in good faith useful improvements in the property, the lessor, upon termination of the lease, shall pay 1/2 of the value of the improvements. No? So, for example, ito typical to, for example, sa mga gas station, yung mga long-term lease, for example, you have a vacant lot, biglang si Jollibee nag-rent sa'yo, nagtayo ng building. So, it's an improvement. So, if there's no provision in the contract, at the end of the lease term, for you to have full ownership of the improvement, the lessor must pay 1/2 of the value of the improvement. That's why 1/2. The lessor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, for example, you have a lot. Then, it was rented by Jollibee for 10 years or 20 years.
Okay.
Then, part of the contract, they will build a building as a restaurant, diba, ng Jollibee. At the end of the lease term, for you to have full ownership of, kasi during the lease term, you just own the land, but you don't own the building. Jollibee own the buildings, diba? So, at the end of the lease term, for you to have ownership of the building, you have to pay 1/2 of the value of the building. No? But that's if you're silent on on improvements, yung rules on improvements. That's why in those instances, we state in the contract that at the end of the lease term, all improvements will inure to the benefit of the lessor without the right of reimbursement from the part of the lessee. Kumbaga, hindi ka na kailangan magbayad, sa'yo na yan. So, dapat nilalagay mo yun sa kontrata kasi at the end of the lease term, baka akala mo, sa akin yung building at the end of the lease term. Bigla sabi ni Jollibee, oy, bayaran muna ako 1/2. Sa'yo na
Yeah.
yung building. Pag hindi
Okay.
mo binayaran ng 1/2, gagawin lang nung lessee mo, sige, I'll just tear it down.
Okay.
So, sayang, di ba?
Sayang.
So, you put in the contract na at the end of the lease term, all improvements will inure to the benefit of or will be owned by the lessor without reimbursement, without need of reimbursement.
We have a very good question dito. Simple question galing kay Jojola. Are business space rentals below 15K VAT exempt? Tungkol sa VAT naman.
Yes, it's VAT exempt.
Okay.
It should be VAT exempt, yes.
All right, that's an easy question. Okay, attorney, anong number na ba tayo? Number 7.
Number 7 is actually the taxes. Actually, I'll make a summary of all the 8 points that I've discussed. No? So number 1 is that you have to please have a comprehensive lease contract. No? Second, make sure that you have an advance rent. You also secure a security deposit from your tenant. Number 4 is make sure that your contract has a provision on how to handle the tenant's complaints. No. Fifth would be clear on the use of the property, whether it's residential, commercial, etc. 6 would be there must be the rule on improvement should be stated in your contract. Number 7, know the taxes or fees that you will pay so that you will know how much net amount that you will receive for the property. Lastly, number 8 would be the rules on how to eject or evict your tenant. No?
Yun. So, any advice about ejectment? Meron, nasabi mo na kanina. Ano pa ba? What else can you add?
So far sa ejectment, kami sa ejectment talaga, we try to exhaust all possible means to eject the tenant without going to the court. So kasi it's first, especially in this time, it's very difficult to go to court. Laging sarado ang court, no? May delay talaga in process. So we try to negotiate, sit down with the tenant before going to the to filing a case in court, no. But all of this hassle, actually it's avoidable eh. How? Conducting your due diligence. Just checking the background of your lessee. If that's a company, you try to ask some of their suppliers or previous lessors to ask kung how are they as a lessee. Second is talagang very important is to have a good contract. Then dapat namo-monitor din siya. So you enforce the contract diligently. So do not be relaxed. Kasi like for example in collecting your rent, sometimes kasi matagal na pala siyang hindi nagbabayad. More than 1 month na, hindi mo pa sinisingil. So nasanay yung tenant na parang okay lang, madelay. So dapat you monitor well all of your lease, kung marami kang lease properties, yung mga contracts mo dapat na monitor. If there are also issues, it should be addressed immediately. So if there are violations, dapat nako-call yung attention nung lessee. Why? Para at least alam nung lessee na, oy, tinitingnan ko yung lessee hindi ko yung property ko, hindi yun basta iniiwan ko na lang. So it's a huge factor yung mga ganong actions on the part of the landlord.
Attorney, so guys, we are now down to our last 5 minutes. So i-type mo yung mga questions nyo pahabol. There's a very good question from Jojola. I hope I pronounced your name right. Mohorendo Jojola. But ang gaganda ng mga questions mo. Is it allowed? Patayin mo yung Meralco. Ayaw mo magbayad, patayin kita ng kuryente.
Oo. So, as a general rule, hindi. Bawal. As a general rule, hindi. However, if there is a provision in the contract that you can, then that's fine. So, it boils down to your contract. No?
Ganda na sinabi mo, attorney. So if your contract says na, if you did not pay, I will cut your internet, then I will cut your electricity.
Well, hindi naman ganun yung, it's really more of yung stop yung provisions of the utility.
I see. All right. Ano pa ba? Very good question. How about, okay, attorney, this is a good question from the audience. Alam mo, majority of our landlords mababait naman, di ba? Lahat ng mga audience natin, they have good heart, good faith. But sometimes it's a challenge ka talaga with your tenants, di ba? They abuse you, they take you for granted. What if warehouse, maayos ka naman, nagbabayad naman sila. Then one day you get a call from, a police na may illegal gamit pala sa loob. Mai-involve ka ba? Wala ka namang kinalaman dun sa business sa loob.
Okay. Depende kung anong illegal na gamit. So, if drugs, yes. Kasi if that's illegal drugs, then yes. Kasi you use a property, there's a specific provision under the law that the property owner could be held liable also.
Oh, really?
Yes, oo. So, but for other activities, there's no specific, depending on the activity, again, you have to check the special law. But for other activities, none naman. However, note still yung hassle.
Yeah.
Pati also yung it might have an effect on the goodwill do sa property.
Definitely.
Oo, definitely. Kasi imagine if kung ano man yung nandyan, diba? So, baka it's difficult for you to rent the place to another person. Second, if there's an illegal activity there, most likely there would be some evidence gathering first by the police. So papadlock muna yan. Hindi mo, baka for a month or two, walang pwedeng gumalaw kasi syempre nag-evidence gathering pa sila. So for that time period, kahit most likely the tenant will no longer pay you, di ba? Kasi baka nakakulong na yon.
Okay.
Pero hindi mo mapalis yung property kasi nandun pa yung mga police.
But that's a financial part. I think that's easier to absorb yung financial. May chance ba na ma-involve ka dun sa gamit na nasa loob? And how do you protect yourself?
Yun nga, if that's drugs, yes, it's possible. It's illegal drugs, illegal substance, it's possible. How do you protect yourself? First, even though you put it in the contract that you will shield it from all the liabilities. Pero syempre, kontrata yan. Pag nandyan na yan, kahit naman sabihin mo na dito yung kontrata, there would still be hassle. So my suggestion is that you constantly monitor your lessees. And part of the monitoring is that usually there's a provision in the contract that you can inspect the property within reasonable hours. Business hours. So, you inspect the property once in a while. Like, for example, every other month, you check kung merong unusual activity in your lease property.
What if sabihin nila, ivermectin lang to or something? Yeah, got it. Thank you, attorney, for how to compute goodwill of a property.
Oo. Ayan. Very difficult na to compute yung goodwill ng property. Oo. Kasi kahit yung hindi property, it's very difficult to the goodwill. Kasi it's your perceived value of your property depending on the location, on the use, on the history of the property, who are the previous owner of the property. Sometimes that's may factor yan na parang, dati dito si ganyan. Diba? Sometimes even the feng shui matters. So facing east, west, di ba? So it depends on it's really just a perceived value on the part of the lessor or lessee.
Pag tinatanong ako, anong facing ng property, I tell them it's facing the sky. Hindi naman may view ng sky, di ba?
Yeah, oh. So ano 'yan, yung goodwill talaga it's depending on the yung nangyayari. Kasi but definitely if there's a illegal na nangyari diyan, for example, especially kunwari may nagkaroon ng patayan, nagkaroon ng shootout. Nako, I'm pretty sure yung mga mahilig mag-feng shui, most probably they will not rent that property.
Pero on
Kasi
the other
bad
side
feng
naman,
shui na eh. Oh.
yes. On the other side, Jojo, kung dyan naman, kunyari, o dito nag-rent dati si, kunwari, sino ba? Sino bang artist ang sikat ngayon? Di ba? Nagkakaroon din ng value, umakyat.
Yes, yun din. O dati nagrenta to, di ba? So kasi
Oo.
pag minsan, pag merong known individuals or known entities who previously rented the property, nagkakaroon siya ng goodwill kasi there's nagkakaroon ng perception that the property is actually good. Walang
Mhm.
problema yung property. Kasi if this person or this entity na well-known entered into a contract with this lessor and used this property might be good.
Yes, I agree. Kaya yung tinitirahan ni Marvin Guillermo ngayon, the Bitcoin King, next time pag ibebenta sa market yan, baka 10 times more expensive, Marvin. Attorney, we've reached our destination and, you've been giving us so much tips for the past 1 hour. And we appreciate you. Maraming salamat. Looks like we don't have any more questions and I hope nag-enjoy kayo. Guys, if you are watching the show and you learned a lot, please type in the comment box any appreciation message para kay Attorney. So Attorney, do you have any final advice sa ating mga viewers?
Okay, for our viewers, in investing in real property, leasing out your property is very, very, very important. That first you conduct your due diligence on your lessee. Second is that you craft a comprehensive lease contract. So that's two advice that I could give you that hopefully will avoid all or most of the problems that you will encounter in leasing out your properties.
Maraming salamat and that's a wonderful closing message. On that note, Attorney, so much appreciation for you. Thank you very much, Attorney.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I hope you learned a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Good night. And thank you, Sean, for doing our back-end tech. Thank you. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you. Good night, everyone.